In this video, we're going to talk about the F5 ACI ServiceCenter application, which sits on top of the Cisco APIC App Center platform.
So we're going to log into the application, which is already present on the APIC controller. And once we log in, we're going to see different devices that have been discovered by the application, different BigIP devices. Now let's log into each one of these devices. And as we log in to these devices, you will see that the app recognizes what kind of device it is. Is it a standalone? Is it an HA? Or is it a VCMP? And adds it in the appropriate section on the left-hand side of the pane. Now these devices have been discovered by the app by using the LLDP protocol. Now let's take a look at one of the BigIPs here, which is a physical BigIP. When we log into this BigIP, we're going to see its LLDP attributes. So when we go under Network and Interfaces, the LLDP is enabled. And if you click on the neighbors, the BigIP also recognizes the APIC leaf as one of its LLDP neighbor. Under Interfaces on the BigIP, we also have to make sure that the LLDP is set to the same as APIC, in this case transmit and receive, and the management address is part of one of the LLDP attributes. When the app looks at the LLDP neighbors, it does use the management address of the BigIP, and that is how it adds it in the left-hand pane in the menu. Now, once we've discovered the devices, we can also view the topology for that particular device. So here we get a view of what interface on the BigIP is connected to what leaf and what port on the APIC. Now let's go into a different box, the VCMP, and click on Topology. Here you can see the VCMP host has two interfaces, 2.1 and 2.2, which is connected to different leaves on the APIC. When you hover over these interfaces, you can view more details about the interface, both from the BigIP as well as from the APIC. Now there is a device level topology, but also there is a system level topology. So if you go under admin and click on topology, you will be able to view all the BigIPs that are part of the fabric and have been discovered and how they are basically part of the APIC topology. In the whole topology view, when you hover over the interfaces, there will be less information from what you will get if you go to the individual device topology. Now this was about the devices discovered. Let's also add a new device, and here we're going to add a BigIP virtual edition, which is a VE. So we provided the IP, the username, password, and we log in to that particular BigIP. Now as you can see, there is already some information on this BigIP, which is part of the app. So let's just go into the network stitching, and if we go to the logical device cluster and look at the VLANs, we do already have the network stitch. So we have the VLAN and the self IP already configured. Let's go into actually deploying a new application. So here we're going to select a new partition, which we're going to call as dynamic endpoint. And what we're trying to depict here is the dynamic endpoint attach detach feature that is part of the app. So we define a partition and application web app. We choose a template here, simple HTTP, and we add these specific parameters. We add the server port, the virtual IP address, as well as the virtual port for the virtual address. Now when we add this information, we can also add a manage endpoint mapping button, as you can see on top of the template. Now this allows us to choose a particular tenant app and EPG on the APIC from which workload that is part of that particular endpoint group is automatically going to be added or deleted to a particular pool on the BigIP. So let's go ahead and submit this particular application with an endpoint mapping to it. And let's have a look at the APIC as to what members are actually part of that tenant app EPG right now. So if we log into the APIC and go to that particular endpoint group and look at the endpoints, there are about 9 endpoints that have been learned by this EPG. So we scroll up and the endpoints that are learned are of the form of 192, 168, 56. Now these are 9 endpoints that are present. So once we create a mapping and deploy that mapping on the BigIP, these endpoints will automatically get added to the pool. And in the future, if there are more endpoints added or removed from this particular EPG, it will automatically be added and removed from the pool on the BigIP. Now let's go back to the application. We deployed the application and we can view the deployed application through the Application Inventory tab. Now from this Inventory tab, you can see exactly what application. You can view the endpoints, which is basically the pool members. And as you can see, we have those 9 pool members already a part of the BigIP pool that we just saw. Let's have a look at what got configured on the BigIP. We go under the partition dynamic EP, we click on network map, and here we see the VIP, the web pool, and all the members, along with the port of a particular pool member. Now let's simulate an actual endpoint detach. So here we're just going to power off the application server that's hosting those IP addresses in order to simulate a dynamic endpoint detach from the APIC. We're going to go to the APIC and log in into the APIC fabric to see the logs. So for the application, the logs are placed at data tool logs and the name of the application, which in our case is F5 networks _ F5 ACI ServiceCenter. We go under the directory endpoint updates. And in this directory, for each of the devices or BigIPs, there's a separate log to view the endpoint updates. So we are interested in the 73.191, and we're going to tail these logs and look for the detach notification. Now, we see the detach notification has come into the app. So the APIC sends the notification, which is received by the application. And as soon as the application sees the detach notification, it runs a command on the BigIP to then delete those pool members from the BigIP. So we go into the BigIP to the particular partition, and let's go back to the network map. And here we see it has deleted all of those IP addresses or all of those pool members. And the same is reflected on the application. So this is the dynamic detach. Now let's also simulate the attach notification. So we're going to turn off this application server and go back into the logs and wait for the attach notification. Here we see we get the attach notification, which is very similar to the detach notification. And in a similar manner, the app handles the notification and takes the appropriate step. Here, all the pool members are added back to the web pool. Now, let's also look at a feature of where you can export the database and import it later on. Since the app is stateful, it does have a database associated with it. Now let's go back to the app and actually let's disable and delete the app so that we can see how the import export DB is working. So here we're going to delete the app from the APIC. So that's going to delete the database and all the devices associated with it. We're going to upload the application once again. Once the app is uploaded and available, we are going to enable the application. Once the app is enabled, we are now going to import the DB. So as you can see, only the devices that were discovered through LLDP are present, but the other device we added is not present. So let's go ahead and import the DB here. Once you import the DB, you're going to see all of the devices that you added and all the database that's present with that device. So let's log in into our virtual edition and go into our L4 to L7 Application Services Inventory tab. Here we're going to see the application that we deployed is present in the app and also present on the BigIP. Now, I also want to touch upon the visibility portion of the app. Since we've been talking about the nodes, let's go into the node table and into the partition, the dynamic endpoint partition. Here you will see all the endpoints that we added are present in this particular view. Similarly, we can also go to the VIP table, as you can see, and for the VIP you can see the pool that the VIP belongs to as well as the nodes that belong to a pool and associate it with its tenant, app, and endpoint group.
This information is useful to see where the workload belongs in your APIC fabric and to which pool and VIP it is associated to on the BigIP. It's a great troubleshooting tool that tells you what is the health monitor of your VIP pools and nodes, and if there are any problems, exactly which tenant, app, and EPG to look at on the APIC to debug further. This brings us to the end of the video.